setup this week because I'm not in my usual location, so I have no green screen, and I'd love your thoughts on it. Do we like the green screen, or do you prefer a more au naturel look? Let me know in the comments below. Let's start with the obvious crazy news of the week, which is that a man who was dressed up like an old woman in a wheelchair threw cake at the Mona Lisa at the Louvre Museum in Paris. I mean, he literally rolled up to the painting, tried to smash the bulletproof glass protecting it, and then smeared cake on the glass, which he claims he did because we need to think about the earth and the people destroying it. Dude, what do you have against the Mona Lisa? Also, she's Italian. I'm pretty sure she prefers gelato. This is actually not the first time someone has tried to vandalize this painting. In fact, the reason there's a protective glass in front of it is because someone threw acid at it in the 1950s. Hasn't this woman been through enough? We got a lot this week. We'll start with the latest in Ukraine, Biden's trip to Asia, elections in Australia, the Iranian government's latest thuggery, and we're kicking off Pride Month by featuring an Iranian artist fighting for LGBTQ+ rights. Before we start though, please hit that subscribe button below, click the notification bell, and like this video. President Biden announced that the US would be sending advanced rocket systems to Ukraine, which is important because those are no joke, and it kind of means we're moving to the next phase of this war. These rockets have a GPS system, so they can pinpoint and strike an enemy target with precision nearly 50 miles away. Ukraine promised to use these rockets only inside Ukraine and not in Russian territory, but Russia responded by saying that the US is deliberately and diligently pouring fuel on the fire, and that giving these rockets won't help resume peace talks. But Biden published an op-ed in the New York Times where he argues the opposite. He explained that his #1 goal is to support an independent and sovereign Ukraine that can defend itself, and that the only way to end this war would be through diplomatic negotiations, and that heavily arming Ukraine would put Ukraine's President Zelensky in a position of strength in those negotiations. Russia made some territorial gains this week in the eastern part of Ukraine, and they're heavily bombarding the Donbass area and also torturing pro-Ukrainian citizens there. But that doesn't necessarily mean Russia is actually advancing in this war. Ukraine has already proven it has a strong resistance and is able to take back cities that Russia has seized. And the rockets they're receiving are meant to push back on Russia more successfully. You also have signs of Russia's struggles, like the fact that they just announced they would be upping the age of men allowed to fight in the military. That seems a little desperate. A Russian diplomat in Geneva also just publicly defected, but I wouldn't expect the dominoes to fall just yet. Russia still has a lot of tools in its toolkit, and they have an entire other chunk of its military that sits on the eastern part of the country near China. Most importantly though, the world isn't backing down. In addition to the advanced military aid going to Ukraine from the US, Germany, and others, the EU announced it had finally reached an agreement to ban most of Russia's oil by the end of the year. That's 400 million a day in funds that Russia will lose per day. Regardless of who's in the lead, the war is now entering its 4th month, and there are a lot of signs that the violence could linger. But Biden's move to give these rockets is an attempt to strengthen Ukraine so much that it could corner Russia into negotiations. And so hopefully, that's where we're headed next. President Biden traveled to South Korea and Japan last week with the goal of reinforcing our alliances in Asia, which sounds kind of boring, but it's a big deal because he mainly went to tell China to back the F up. He met with both the Japanese and the South Korean presidents, where they agreed on a range of issues, like cooperating on technology and intelligence and trade. Trade was a big one actually, because Biden is pushing something called the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which would be a trade deal among 13 Indo-Pacific countries that's meant to push back against China's global economic influence. Biden also talked about investing in semiconductor production, which is a big one since semiconductor exports slowed down a lot during the pandemic, causing supply chain shortages in nearly every industry. Now this part was super important. He also talked military cooperation and our defense pacts with these countries, which is critical because he was basically telling China not to behave like Russia did in Ukraine, especially with regards to Taiwan. He did not mince words when asked about Taiwan. In fact, he said that the US would respond militarily if China tries to invade Taiwan. Super quickly, so you get why this is so important. Taiwan is a democratically governed island off the coast of China, and because of a civil war in China in the 1940s, the Chinese leader at the time fled to Taiwan with his supporters and declared Taiwan as the real China. And we actually recognized Taiwan as the real China too, until President Nixon changed that in 1979, and the other China was recognized as the real one. Now, Taiwan wants its independence, and China wants to reunify. We have a policy of strategic ambiguity with Taiwan, which basically means we don't spell out what we would do. However, we do sell them defensive weapons. So Biden's comments were stronger than we usually use regarding Taiwan, but Biden may have also meant we would indirectly support Taiwan with our military in the event of an invasion. So things like arming them and offering intelligence and so on. Biden's statement comes just after our intelligence chiefs said that while China would prefer to take over Taiwan peacefully, it's still preparing itself so that its military could prevail if the US intervenes. I told you this sounded like a boring FOPO presidential trip, but it's actually kind of sexy, right? Now, the intel chiefs also said they believed the world's response to Russia's aggression in Ukraine would likely stave off a Chinese takeover of Taiwan for now. But still, Biden is right to watch this corner of the world very closely and publicly reinforce our friendships there. Australia just had elections, and I want to talk about it for two reasons. First, Because Australia is a really close partner of ours, so their leadership matters. They're one of what's called the Five Eyes, which are the 5 countries that share top secret intelligence with each other. And we work with them in pushing back on the Chinese regime's efforts to expand its presence in the region, among a bunch of issues. The Labour Party, which is a liberal political party in Australia, won the election, and the new Prime Minister is Anthony Albanese. One of the things I found fascinating is that Australians are required by law to vote, or they could be fined or face a day in court. Can you imagine? That's like the opposite of here. So I asked you all if you thought the US should legally require Americans to vote, and just 61% of you said yes. This election was important for a few reasons. So I asked my Aussie friend and Oh My World's top geek, Misha Zelinsky, to explain why.
G'day guys, huge news out of Australia. Labor has won the election and Anthony Albanese is Australia's 31st Prime Minister. So who's the man we all call Albo? Well, Albo, unlike a lot of politicians, has a genuine log cabin story. He grew up in social housing with a single mother and through public education has risen to the highest office in our land. So how did Albo and Labor do it? There are 3 big factors that played this election. Number 1, the unpopularity of incumbent Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Aussies were totally fed up with Scott Morrison and got the baseball bats out for him. They hadn't forgotten his trip to Hawaii when he went on holidays during Australia's bushfire crisis with the country literally on fire. Number 2, climate change. Scott Morrison and the Liberal Party have been actively undermining serious action on climate change for over a decade. Australians want to see urgent action to reduce carbon emissions. With drought and fire on the rise in Australia, it's time to act. And lastly, women voters. Women have been utterly appalled at Scott Morrison and his complete lack of empathy in governing and his complete lack of commitment to gender equality and governing for all Australians. So there it is, Anthony Albanese is our new PM. He's the first guy to lead Labor to government in a decade and just the 4th Labor leader in history to lead Labor from opposition into government since World War II. Good luck, Albo. Back to you, Hagar. See you soon.
The Iranian government is feeling insecure lately, and as a result, it's cracking down on its people. A building in a port city called Abadan just collapsed, and 37 people there were killed. And when Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei tried to address the mourners, hundreds showed up to boo and shout at him. It was so loud and disruptive that he had to stop the speech, so the government responded by firing tear gas and shooting at peaceful protesters. They also arrested and beat a journalist at one of the demonstrations. This comes as the Iranian government has been planning to execute a Swedish-Iranian dual national named Ahmadreza Jalali, who's a disaster medicine doctor who was unjustly detained there in 2016. The UN says he's been physically and psychologically tortured, and the Iranian regime has set dates to execute him. But they keep pushing those dates, likely because they're using him for political leverage or for a potential prisoner swap. Mainly that's because they're pissed Sweden arrested a former Iranian official for massacring thousands of Iranian political prisoners. There's a bigger picture here, and that's that the Iranian government has been feeling intense pressure from its people because of rising food prices and inflation. And with the nuclear deal not looking like it's going anywhere, the Iranian regime feels insecure because it feels it has few options to kickstart its economy. I mean, it could stop its nuclear program, its human rights abuses, and supporting terrorism across the region, but clearly that's low on their priority list. So instead of being rational and listening to the Iranian people, this insecurity has caused the regime to crack down even more. For that reason, the Iranian regime is on my shit list this week. I have a super exciting guest to kick off Pride Month. Alireza Shojaian is an Iranian artist who was born in Tehran but now lives in exile in Paris. His work aims to fight prejudice against LGBTQ+ people, and as he explains, his own queerness meant he couldn't continue working in Iran, where carnal depictions are censored and sexual identity is scrutinized and politicized. He just won the most prized award at the Oslo Freedom Forum, called the Václav Havel International Prize for Creative Dissent. And he won this award for one of his recent projects with Paycon Art Car, which is a really cool organization that has Iranian artists who support human rights paint a Paycon car as their canvas. Paycon cars used to be a popular Iranian car, and now they're being used to send a strong message. Alireza painted the first Paycon car for this project, and the car that he painted was actually previously gifted by the former Shah of Iran to the Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu. So a car that was once owned by a dictator now stands as a symbol for the struggle for LGBTQ+ rights in Iran. Alireza joined me to explain his work. Hi Alireza, thank you so much for joining me on Oh My World. It's so good to see you, my friend.
Hi, thank you. So good to see you as well. And happy Pride Month.
Happy Pride Month. I'm so excited for Pride Month, and I am so honored that you are my first Crush List guest for Pride Month. It means a lot. You know, first I want to congratulate you on the award you won. It's so impressive. Can you tell us how you use your artwork to advance LGBTQ+ rights?
Thank you so much. I use my art as a weapon. Actually, it's the strongest weapon I have to say things that we are not able to perhaps saying it by word. And I look at it as a key to so many doors and to the heart of so many people. And I found it much more easier for people, for the society to learn things from it, to feel related to it, and to understand it. So doing art and showing this to the society, it's with the hope to make a change in the perspective of the society. And more important for me is to document the stories that they are undocumented, to keep it for the future, because there is a sentence that it's very inspiring for me from John Berger. He says that I can't explain what art is exactly, but it can judge the judged, and it can show to the future what was the suffer of the past. So this is the main interest for me, to capture what we're going through and what we are a witness of for the future, because I believe the future generation will have a better experience. And with the work that we're doing today, I have the hope the next generation, the other Alirezas, won't have to leave their home, just easy to be their true self.
That's so beautiful. And Alireza, I really agree. I think you are giving a voice to the voiceless. And I also have hope that work like yours will inevitably make a change. Thank you so much for your work. And thank you for coming on Oh My World.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Geeks. The first Friday of June is actually National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And so Oh My World is calling on our leaders to shape up and pass some common sense gun control regulations. If you don't know where to start, then just look at Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who just announced he'd be introducing legislation to ban the buying and selling of all handguns.
Mwah.
Before you go, don't forget to let me know in the comments below if you liked having a more natural background. And of course, please like this video, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you have something you want me to talk about, let me know over social media and I will definitely give you a shout out. Stay fabulous, Geeks.